So based on our lesson today, what we're going to do is we're going to try to find the original price in two conditions. In the first case, we know the sales tax and the tax rate. And in the second case, we'll have to know the total price paid and the tax rate. Starting off with the first case, we have to first define our terms sales tax and the tax rate. The tax rate is a percentage of whatever you purchased, whereas sales tax is a dollar amount. The sales tax and the tax rate are equivalent to each other, which allows us to set up ratios and proportions in order to find the original cost. If we take a look at this question, the tax rate is 7% and the sales tax is $19.60. This allows us to set up a ratio. $19.60 is equivalent to 7%. Now, we talked about this in class, but when we have a percentage, we know that this is a part of the original cost. So if we have, let's say, 50%, this would be half of the original cost. If we had 10%, this would be a tenth of the original part. And if we had 100%, that means it's going to be exactly the same as just the original cost. So the goal here is if we were given 7%, how can we find 100%? This requires two steps. The first step is you really want to find what is 1%. So let's take a look at this. Remember, we're going to be writing equivalent fractions by dividing the numerator and denominator by the same numbers. If we have 7% and we want to get 1%, how do we go from 7 to 1? We would divide by 7. So 7 divided by 7, this is equal to 1. What is 1960 divided by 7? Let's do that over here on the side. So we want to divide it by 7, 2, 5, 6. Multiply this by 8, 56. Subtract 0. And how many 7s go into 0? 0. Keep the decimal point in the same place. And now we know 1% of the original cost is going to be $2.80. So if we know 1% is $2.80, how do we get from 1% to 100%? That leads us to step 2, find 100%. And this should be very simple. In this case, we're going to be multiplying by 100. If we're going to be doing the same thing over here to the numerator, that would be the same thing as moving the decimal point 2 places over to the right. 1, 2. So we know 280 is the original price, or 100% of the original cost. So that's how we take care of the first case. Now let's take a look at the second case, and I have myself a little example from Macy's.com. So I went to go look for a bunch of blouses, and I really enjoyed this one, the Karen Kane printed cold shoulder ruffled top. And I thought this was pretty nice. So let's take a look at the situation over here. In this case, we know that the total cost is $135.68. But it doesn't tell our tax rate. However, I'm going to be supplying that information. The tax rate is going to be 6%. Now, as a reminder, whenever you purchase an item, there is a subtotal, the original cost of the item before we add on any additional charges, such as shipping or tax. And the idea is basically if the original cost is 100%, in order to find the total cost, what you'll have to do is also add the percentage of tax. In this case, we said our tax percent was going to be 6%. So 100 plus 6% will give us our total percent, 106%. And now we have a slightly different situation, but it's very similar at the same time. 106 is your total percent, and your total cost is 135. This allows us to set up a proportion. 135.68 dollars is equal to 106%. The hardest step is really just figuring out what is the total percent, what is being compared here. So whenever you're starting a problem, you might be asking yourself, is this a total cost question, or is this a I know the tax question? Now, if we want to figure out, same thing as in the last step. Our first step would be to find 1%. Our second step would be to find 100%. So if we want to find 1%, we have to figure out if this is equal to 106%, how do we go from 106 to 1%? We can do that by dividing by 106. And I'm not going to bore you with the details. Let's just do this on a calculator. So we have 135.68 divided by 106. So now we know $1.28 is equal to 1% of your original cost. And I will find the second step. How do we go from 1% to 100%? Exactly the same thing as the last step, but this time we're going to be multiplying by 100. Following the same step over here, multiplying this by 100. That's the same thing as moving the decimal place 2 times over. We now know that the original cost is $128. And if we're going to reveal everything over here, $128 is the original cost. And furthermore, if the order total is 135.68 cents and the original cost is $128, we can also calculate our tax, $7.68. So now whenever you're shopping online and you want to buy yourself a really expensive blouse, now you know how to calculate the tax rate.